Hello, welcome to another Max Chroma tutorial video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the Smart Object Photoshop files which come with the Max Chroma HCWBTSGM Colorizer action set. So if you download the action set, you will get the Colorizer action file, but you also get these two Photoshop files, and they are the Max Chroma HCWB 6 Hues Black, Gray, and White Smart Colorizer or Smart Object Colorizer for Photoshop in 8-bit and 16-bit. So I'm going to be showing in the video how to use these files. You're really just going to open them in Photoshop. So I'll double click it with Photoshop Open, or I could drag it in or go to File Open and get it that way. And basically this is set up so that you don't have to run the action of the Colorizer 6 hues. You have a file that's already splitting the image into these various layers, and it has the colorizers on it. So I can change the color of like all of that red information and just move it around. Okay. Now the thing is, why I wanted to show this is it's different from running actions. In some ways it might be faster, but in other ways it's more limited, and we'll get into that. This sort of helps me to teach the difference between step-by-step processing with actions, doing things that works with live adjustment layers, and therefore a smart object can work on that. Or what we're going to get into in future videos is directly processing an image, processing the pixels of an image using code and programming. So the way to use this file, if you want to change the image, is just like any smart object. So what happens is, this is the original smart object, and it says on there, replace this file to change all the objects. And all you have to do is double click to go into here. So this is now a separate document that is the smart object itself. And let's say I'm going to replace it with this file right here. So I would basically take this and copy it, but I want to kind of look at the image size, maybe go to the canvas size of it and see that it's 13.36 by 9.07. And I could go into this, change the canvas size of this, 13.06 by, what was it, 9.07? I'll have to double check that again. Go to this one, canvas size, 13.36 by 9.07. So we're going to change this canvas size 13.36. Oh, I did it relative. I don't want to do that. So 13.36 by 9.07. And then I'm going to paste, Control V, to paste the image in there. And I could make sure it's in the same position by paste in place. And then I want to delete this background layer. So I've only got this. Now I don't want to press Control S or File Save just yet to update all these. I'm going to go back to this document and also make the canvas size, so not relative, it's going to be exactly 13.36 by 9.07. And we will go ahead and just hit Control S on this, and it will save and update everything there. And one of the things we can see is we would need to grab the transparency of this and bring it over. So if there is transparency, I'm going to basically group all these layers together. Control G to group all colors for transparency. And then I'll have to basically go to this and do layer mask from transparency, or I can't really get that unless I change it from a smart object. So I'll just duplicate that real quick and rasterize the layer. And then I'll do layer mask from transparency. Now I can grab that and drag it over to that group. And you'll see now we have the group with the transparency. So even that right there shows that it's a little bit limited in working with the transparency of the smart object. If I was to try to write that in to this file, it really wouldn't work. There's no way to grab the transparency from the smart object itself. So there's one of the limitations right there. You know, the way this works is after saving it, it did update it pretty much instantaneously. It only took a few seconds. So it runs faster than the actions, but you saw all the steps I had to go through. I had to know the image size, the canvas size, set everything correctly first, just to be able to update that. I can go in and change these around, do the colorizing and color grading just like I was before in the other actions. But the fact that I had to know those steps is, to me, what kind of limits it. So I'm still providing those for free. You can play around with it. You can see how they work in that action set, those two different files. One is in 16-bit if you want to run it there. But why wouldn't I go and make them all like that instead of running through these step-by-step actions? Well, you saw part of it had to do with, you need to know a few things. First, you got to go into the canvas size, the image size, change it around. It doesn't account for the transparency automatically, right? And so, it's a little bit destructive processing, but the whole point of these actions is to give you control over the image. And you would, with this one, you could go in and now change the image later. Let's say I want to change the hue, or let's look at it first and see what have we got in the green and cyan. I can change that around, changes some of the colors there, maybe go to the cyan, and I can really adjust the color there, right? It's in the cyan one. If I double click this image and maybe I control U to change the hue first, hit OK, and then control S to save. Now it's instantly updated into here, and now that is under the magenta. Okay, so this is now being controlled by the magenta colorizer. And there's a few things where, let's say I wanted to use the method before in the other actions to make it easier to see the colorizer layers, to go to mode and screen. Problem is, well, this one works. There's just those particular layers. So I can go ahead and work with those, like change the gray around, colorize that however I want to. And that pretty much works. But if I wanted to go into a more advanced set, like the 6 hues times 4 tones, the tint, shade, and tone, I've played around with making a file that does this. And this one basically would go into all of those, but it becomes so many different layer groups to do the processing correctly that the file itself is essentially unmanageable. And trying to save it and update it, sometimes that works quick, but going and just making adjustments becomes a little more difficult to do. So I've built it up and gone through and made a lot of these layers. But let's say I just want to look at those colorizer layers. So mode, screen, they're all right there, okay, but there's a couple of extra color fills in place. And by screen mode, that pretty much limits them down. But if I want to go and make some of those adjustments, let's just go to the red right here. Change the red chroma. You see when I double click in, it takes a second, and you can see things skipping around a bit. And it really does not update in real time. It's very slow because what's happening is there are hundreds and hundreds of layers just to make some of these extractions happen with adjustment layers over the smart object. So there's the original smart object. It's grouped, it has to be converted to black and white, then extract the hues from it, then take the chroma and divide that out so that there can be a tint, a shade, and a tone. And so you can see that basically this is not something I'm going to go ahead and provide. It's really not as useful. It might take a second when you run the 6 hues times 4 tones, take a minute or two to process, but once it's done, it's much easier to work with. So I'm providing the 6 hues version of the smart object file because that's at least a little bit easier. But you can see, when you're just processing the 6 hues, if I go and go back to this file, I'll close this one. We'll look at another example. So let's say I'm on this file to begin with, and I just run the colorizer 6 hues. It's also not smart, like the smart colorizer. So the action or the smart object file contains all of those colors, even when there's maybe not a lot of the colors in there that I want to adjust. Whereas the smart colorizer actually goes through and divides it out and finds where, based on your threshold, there's just not a lot of color to work with. So let me run the smart colorizer 6 hues. And so this is the part where, compared to a smart object and compared to the actions will take a little time to process, but I don't have to look at the image size, look at the canvas size, save the file, update it, and then this can do the smart extractions. So once this goes and builds the layer splits, and you see it copied the transparency over. And it goes through and does, after running, the smart detection. So it starts scanning through and comparing things that just don't have enough in to really qualify. And so you can see we've got the red, the cyan, the yellow, and if I immediately just go to mode screen, you can see we've limited the file down to being just make adjustments between these different colors. So here's the cyan. I can go ahead and change the hue, change the tone, quickly make adjustments to it however I want to. The yellow is going to be somewhat in here, but mostly in that and the signal light. So the yellow is changing the color of that. And the red is also going to be in the signal light mostly. A little bit in there making it up as well. The gray, so I can lighten things, darken things with the gray areas, give them a color. The black can be changed, etc., just like the colorizer from before. But basically the smart aspects of the actions, to me, it's only when you get into the midtones that it takes a while to process, but once you're done processing, it's a lot faster. So let me go ahead and do, let's say, a different test image. Let's look at this under the 6 hues times 4 tones, or actually let's do the 12 hues times 4 tones smart colorizer automatically on this image. So the image is fairly large. I think it's about 10 by 12 inches at 300 dpi. It's not in 16-bit, it's in 8-bit. So the processing is not going to be as accurate at times with some of the deeper levels of midtones. But with this particular version, it's doing the tints, shades, tones, and chroma. And so you just have to wait a little bit for it to process. But once it's done processing, it is a lot easier to work with, especially with the smart colorizer being, it's going to split it up and determine things that aren't really enough of it there to give you the color control. And so it's just easier to work with than trying that smart object version. So the smart object file essentially is, I'm not going to try to put out that 6 hues or 12 hues times the 4 tones. It's really just too many layers of smart automatic, or I guess adjustment layers put onto the smart object. You can't run some of the same filters that are essentially destructive. It'll destroy that smart object file from working. But basically I don't have to know the image size first and the canvas size and save things, replace them around. This helps me to start to teach the difference between step-by-step processing. I can show how those smart object files work. Essentially it's part of the whole thing behind this YouTube channel and teaching these things about the color model of HWB and the expanded HCWBTSGM. That's hue, chroma, white, black, tint, shade, midtone, and gray. The way that those things split an image up into different levels, and then if you eliminate some of the stuff that is not really in those divisions, you can work with it directly to just change the colors around. So this is unlike anything else available for color grading or color retouching. The thing is I've learned through this process how to program with an image, looking at the pixel colors and converting some of these things automatically in real time on the GPU. So using it in Photoshop is not really the ideal situation for me. The actions, and that's why I have all this stuff, a lot of it's available for free and lower prices. I essentially went and lowered the price of the Max Chroma Master Colorizer to just $25. I had it for $50 with a social discount, but I feel that the social discount is an extra step you got to go to, and I'm really willing to just sell that for $25. The actions are based on the way that all this stuff works, but I've got things that I'm working on which are in direct processing code, so it really kind of does it instantaneously or as fast as your GPU can handle it. And those things I'm going to show in some future videos and teach exactly how I get there. A lot of this is trying to build somewhat of a community around having better tools or a different way to look at the colors in the image and make adjustments to them on both images and on video. And some of this stuff is called color grading or color retouching or photo retouching, etc. And working with an image this way kind of gives you access to things that are not available just looking at the RGB or the hue, saturation, and brightness. So this is done running, and it's done doing the smart process. I'm going to go to mode and screen, and you can see we filtered it down to just these tones. If I want to look at all of them at once, I can go ahead to my layer panel options, make that a little smaller. And you can see the color names, but really I'm just going to minimize it. This is kind of the ideal app that I would want. Instead of processing slowly through all those step-by-step actions, we would want something that just takes the image and looks at all the colors of the pixels and finds out through the threshold just how much is there or present. So I can go right to this kind of skin tone color and instantly make adjustments to it, and it doesn't affect the other colors in the image, right? Change the tone. You know, the red here is probably going to be mostly in the shirt color. So we can change that. That's in the brighter areas. The red shade is going to be in those darker areas, right? So we can just work with that, lower it, some of it in the hair as well. I could just change the color around, go to the mid-tone. So we can really work with the colors in an image directly. You can see a lot of that dark gray is probably in the background. You can just make changes directly to the image colors without having to go in and use a whole bunch of other image adjustments, color balances. Even in raw photography editing, there's a myriad of tools available, but they don't really target the colors that are present in the image as closely or as directly as these work. And so these are essentially getting masks out of all of that stuff and recombining it, reblending it. Okay, so I think I'm going to finish the video there. You can see this particular mask, mid-tone, right there. So there's one particular extraction of the colors from the image. Here's another one. Okay, that orange shade, a lot of it was in the hair and the darker skin tones and the shading. This one. Okay, so all this is doing all that HCWB processing to extract the parts of the image and then colorize them and rebuild them. And then once they're rebuilt, blending together the original image, you've got control over that stuff. The blue was just a little bit in the background, kind of not necessary. I'll just turn a bunch of these on. And you can see how all the different colors separated from the gray scales that blend with them, the black, the gray, the medium gray, the light gray, and the white. And again, if I want to just look at the colorizer layers, so building something like an ideal application for this, I would just want to see those colors and be able to change them using the color picker. So let's go into that shade color. Just make adjustments directly to it. It's only affecting those areas, right? Okay, so that's basically it for this video. I just wanted to show the difference between using a smart object to automatically process it. Now I could do that again on this video, but it's just the 6 hues. So I'm going to go ahead and open maybe the 16-bit file. And there are some quicker ways to do things. Let me just grab this, do Control A to copy, Control C to copy. Go in to this smart object, double clicked on it. I'm going to do Control V to paste it, but then it's bigger than the image, right? So I'm going to press the, I'll Control and select this. You see I've got that selection. I'll hit the letter C or go to Crop tool and just hit Enter. This automatically crops it to that size. I can delete that background, but I still have to go to the original and set the size of this one based on this. So if I go to here and go to Image Canvas Size, 12.923 by 10.88, canvas size 12. I forgot that it was really forgot that. See, I gotta kind of keep it in my memory here. So 923 and 10.88, 12.923 and 10.88, I believe. Change the canvas size to that. Now when I hit Control S to save this, File, Save, it's going to update all of those other uses of that smart object layer in this image here, right? Now I can go to this and do mode screen, and I've got control over each of those. But this is the 6-hue one. It's really not as useful on an image like this where there's lots of skin tones. This just gives me red, yellow, and gray making up all those skin tones. So I can still make adjustments like that, go to the gray. Okay. But it's not as powerful as getting into all those additional levels of midtones and tints and shades on an image like this, and then having the smart filter go ahead and filter them out. Now, the next stuff that we'll get into is just showing a lot of those other products on the page, how all the different aspects of the Master Colorizer work. The free products collection, I'll keep making more videos on each of those. But I want to get into just how cool it is in learning the aspects of an image in not just RGB or CMY or CMYK, not just HSB, hue, saturation, and brightness, and the HWB color model, which is fairly new. It's not really been incorporated in Photoshop or other programs automatically. That's why I make all these actions. But we're going to show how this leads to understanding with blend modes and the step-by-step process. We would sort of boil that down to just a formula or a bit of processing code, and then run those things directly in a image processing application. So that's it for this video. I'll show you guys some more examples of these colorizers working on images and other videos. And thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you want to keep updated, and stay tuned for more.